The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand estate as Camilla Harrison stood at her bedroom window, watching the black cars approach through the iron gates. She had been expecting this day for months, ever since the scandal broke about her late husband's business dealings. The newspaper headlines had been brutal, calling him a thief who had stolen millions from government contracts. Now, 3 months after his sudden death from a heart attack, the authorities were finally coming to claim everything. Camilla clutched her silk robe tighter around her thin frame. At 62 years old, she had lived a life of luxury in this mansion for over 30 years. The house had been her sanctuary, filled with priceless antiques, original paintings, and memories of better times. Her husband Thomas had always been secretive about his work, telling her only that he handled special acquisitions for wealthy clients. She never questioned where the money came from that paid for their lavish lifestyle. The lead car stopped directly in front of the main entrance. Out stepped Commander James Morrison of the Royal Guard, a tall man with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes. He wore the traditional red and gold uniform that commanded respect wherever he went. Behind him emerged 6 other guards, all carrying official documents and wearing serious expressions. Camilla knew there would be no negotiating with these men. When the crown wanted something, they took it. She made her way downstairs slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floors that would soon belong to someone else. The doorbell rang 3 times before she reached it. When she opened the heavy wooden door, Commander Morrison removed his hat and bowed slightly. "Mrs. Harrison, I am Commander Morrison. We have a court order to search and confiscate this property and all its contents. You have 1 hour to gather personal items only. No jewelry, artwork, or items of significant value may be removed." Camilla nodded silently. She had already packed a small suitcase with clothes and family photographs. Everything else would have to stay. As the guards spread throughout the house, she retreated to the library where Thomas used to spend his evenings. She pulled out a leather chair and sat among the thousands of books they would never read again. The guards worked efficiently, cataloging every room and marking items for removal. Camilla watched them handle her possessions with clinical detachment. The crystal chandelier her grandmother had given her, the piano where she had learned to play as a child, the dining set where they had hosted countless dinner parties. All of it would be sold to pay back Thomas's debts. Commander Morrison approached her in the library, holding a thick folder. "Mrs. Harrison, we need you to sign these papers acknowledging the transfer of ownership. The house and everything in it now belongs to the Crown until the debt is settled." As Camilla signed each document, she felt pieces of her life disappearing with every stroke of the pen. The guards had been respectful but thorough. They would return tomorrow with trucks to begin removing the contents. She would spend tonight in her sister's small apartment across town, starting over with nothing but the clothes in her suitcase. When the guards finally left, Camilla walked through her empty house one last time. The silence felt overwhelming after 30 years of life and laughter filling these rooms. She touched the walls gently, saying goodbye to the only home she had known as an adult. Tomorrow she would begin the difficult process of rebuilding her life from scratch, forever marked as the widow of a man who had betrayed his country's trust. 3 days after Camilla left her mansion, Commander Morrison returned with a full investigation team. The house stood empty and cold, its rooms echoing with each footstep as the specialists began their detailed search. This was not just about taking furniture and paintings. The government suspected that Thomas Harrison had hidden stolen artifacts somewhere in the property, items that belonged in museums and royal collections. Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's chief archaeologist, set up her equipment in the main hall. She had worked on several high-profile recovery cases before, but this mansion was different. Built in 1887, it had secret passages and hidden rooms that Victorian architects loved to include. If Thomas had hidden something valuable, he would have chosen these spaces carefully. The team split into groups, each taking a different floor. Morrison focused on the basement, which Thomas had converted into a private study and wine cellar. The walls were lined with expensive bottles, but something felt wrong about the layout. The room seemed smaller than it should be, considering the foundation size they had measured outside. Meanwhile, upstairs in the master bedroom, specialist Rebecca Torres was examining the built-in bookcases. She noticed that one section looked newer than the rest, with slightly different wood staining. When she pressed against certain books, she heard a hollow sound behind the wall. Her excitement grew as she called Morrison on her radio. "Commander, I think we have something up here. This bookcase might be hiding a room." Morrison rushed upstairs as Torres worked to find the opening mechanism. After trying several combinations of book movements, they heard a soft click. A section of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that led to a hidden chamber behind the bedroom wall. The hidden room was small but carefully organized. Shelves lined every wall, and each shelf held items wrapped in protective cloth. Morrison shined his flashlight into the space as Dr. Chen squeezed past him with her examination tools. The air smelled of old wood and preservation chemicals. "Be very careful," Chen whispered as she began unwrapping the first item. "If these are what I think they are, we're looking at irreplaceable historical artifacts." The first cloth revealed an ornate golden chalice with emeralds embedded around its rim. Chen's hands trembled slightly as she recognized the royal seal engraved on its base. This was not just any cup. It was part of the crown's ceremonial collection that had been reported missing 15 years ago. Torres unwrapped another item and gasped. In her hands was a small painting in an elaborate silver frame. The signature in the corner read Rembrandt in the master's distinctive style. This painting had been stolen from the National Gallery 3 years earlier, and the art world had given up hope of ever recovering it. Morrison counted 47 wrapped items in total. As the team carefully revealed each piece, they realized they had stumbled upon one of the largest collections of stolen royal and national treasures ever discovered. There were ancient coins, religious artifacts, rare manuscripts, and jewelry that belonged to several European royal families. "How did he manage to steal all of this?" Torres asked as she photographed each item for evidence. Chen examined the preservation setup Thomas had created. He knew exactly what he was doing. Look at the climate control system, the special lighting, the archival storage materials. This wasn't the work of a simple thief. He was protecting these items like a professional curator. As the day progressed, the team realized that Thomas Harrison had been operating as a high-end art and artifact thief for decades. The hidden room contained detailed records of where each item came from, when it was taken, and how much various collectors had paid for them. His business had been selling stolen treasures to private buyers around the world. Morrison called his superiors immediately. This discovery would make international headlines and potentially help solve dozens of unsolved thefts from museums and royal collections across Europe. But first, they needed to secure everything and begin the complex process of returning these treasures to their rightful owners. The news of the treasure discovery spread through London like wildfire. By evening, reporters crowded outside the mansion gates, their cameras flashing as armed guards transported wooden crates to secure government vehicles. The story dominated every news channel, with headlines screaming about the Harrison treasure trove and the royal thief's secret chamber. Camilla learned about the discovery from her sister's television. She sat in the tiny living room, watching footage of investigators carrying boxes from her former home, feeling her world collapse even further. The man she had shared her bed with for 30 years had been living a double life she never suspected. Every vacation they had taken, every party they had hosted, every moment of happiness had been built on stolen history. Detective Inspector Linda Walsh arrived at the sisters' apartment that evening. Walsh was a specialist in art theft cases, known for her ability to trace stolen items back through complex networks of dealers and collectors. She needed to question Camilla about her knowledge of Thomas's activities, even though the widow appeared genuinely shocked by the revelations. "Mrs. Harrison, I need you to understand that you are not under arrest," Walsh said gently as she sat across from Camilla in the cramped kitchen. "But we need to know everything you can tell us about your husband's business trips, his contacts, and any unusual behavior you might have noticed." Camilla's hands shook as she poured tea for both women. "Detective, I swear I never knew any of this. Thomas told me he worked in import and export. He traveled often, sometimes for weeks at a time, but he said it was for buying and selling legitimate antiques. I never questioned him because we lived so comfortably." Walsh took detailed notes as Camilla described Thomas's habits. He often returned from trips with small gifts, jewelry, silk scarves, expensive perfumes, which he claimed were tokens from grateful clients. Now these gifts took on a sinister meaning. Had they been stolen too? "Did he ever bring home any historical artifacts? Anything that seemed unusually old or valuable?" Walsh asked. Camilla thought carefully. "There was one thing. About 5 years ago, he brought home a small bronze statue. He said it was a replica of something Roman, just a decoration for his office. It had strange markings on the base that looked like ancient writing. Walsh's interest sharpened. Where is the statue now? In his office, on the bookshelf behind his desk. At least it was there when I left. Walsh immediately called Morrison, who was still at the mansion coordinating the removal of artifacts. Within minutes, he was examining Thomas's office more carefully. Sure enough, on the bookshelf sat a small bronze figure of a Roman soldier. When Morrison lifted it, he could see the ancient inscriptions Camilla had mentioned. Dr. Chen examined the piece immediately. "This is not a replica," she announced with excitement. "This is a genuine Roman artifact, probably from the 2nd century. Based on the craftsmanship and inscriptions, it likely came from a major museum collection." The discovery of the Roman statue in plain sight made the investigators realize that Thomas had been even bolder than they first thought. He had not hidden everything in the secret room. Some stolen items had been displayed openly in his house, disguised as ordinary decorations or replicas. Meanwhile, Camilla's interrogation continued into the night. Walsh showed her photographs of some of the recovered treasures, hoping to trigger memories about where Thomas might have acquired them. When Camilla saw the golden chalice with emeralds, she gasped. "I remember this cup," she said quietly. "Thomas used it during a dinner party last Christmas. He said it was a family heirloom from his grandmother. All our guests drank from it during the toast." Walsh realized that Thomas had been so confident in his scheme that he had actually used stolen royal artifacts to entertain guests in his own home. The audacity was breathtaking. How many people had unknowingly held priceless stolen treasures during those elegant dinner parties? As the night wore on, Camilla provided more details about Thomas's travels and contacts. She remembered names of people he had mentioned, cities he had visited frequently, and odd phone calls he had taken in private. Each piece of information would help investigators track down other stolen items and identify Thomas's network of criminal contacts. By dawn, Walsh had filled 2 notebooks with information. Camilla had cooperated fully, her shock and horror at Thomas's crimes appearing completely genuine. The investigation was just beginning, but they now had solid leads to follow across multiple countries where Thomas had conducted his illegal business. 2 weeks after the discovery, international investigators arrived in London to examine the recovered treasures. The secret room had yielded artifacts from 12 different countries, making this a complex international case. Each government wanted their stolen items returned, but first, experts needed to authenticate every piece and trace how Thomas had acquired them. Professor Antoine Dubois flew in from Paris to examine what appeared to be medieval French manuscripts. As he carefully opened the ancient parchments in the secure examination room at Scotland Yard, his excitement was obvious. These were not just any old documents, they were missing pages from the famous book of Hours that had been stolen from the Louvre's manuscript collection 8 years earlier. These illuminated pages are worth millions, Dubois explained to Morrison as he photographed each delicate sheet. But their historical value is immeasurable. They contain prayers and artwork created by monks in the 14th century. We thought they were lost forever. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Rossi from Rome was examining a collection of ancient coins that had been wrapped separately in the hidden room. Her expertise in Roman currency immediately revealed that these coins were from the private collection of the Vatican museums. They had been reported missing 2 years ago during a renovation project, and Vatican security had never been able to determine how they disappeared. "Look at this Aureus coin," she said, holding up a golden piece to the light. "It bears the image of Emperor Augustus and was minted in 27 BC. There are only 12 known examples in existence, and this was one of the Vatican's most prized possessions." The authentication process revealed the true scope of Thomas's criminal network. He had not worked alone. The precision and planning required to steal from such secure locations indicated a sophisticated organization with inside contacts at museums and royal collections across Europe. Inspector Walsh interviewed the mansion's former staff members, hoping to find clues about Thomas's accomplices. The housekeeper, Maria Santos, had worked for the family for 15 years. She remembered strange visitors who came to the house late at night, men who spoke with foreign accents and carried small briefcases. Mr. Thomas always met them in his private study, Maria told Walsh during her interview. He would send me and the other staff home early on those nights. When we returned the next morning, There would sometimes be new items in the house, paintings, sculptures, small decorative pieces. He said they were gifts from business associates. The gardener, William Cross, provided another important clue. He had noticed that Thomas often used a different car for his nighttime meetings, a plain black sedan that he kept in a separate garage behind the main house. This car was never used for family purposes and always left the property before dawn. Walsh immediately searched the hidden garage and found the black sedan. In the trunk, forensic specialists discovered traces of museum-grade packing materials, the same type used to transport delicate artifacts safely. The car's GPS system revealed frequent trips to Dover, the closest port to continental Europe. Dr. Chen made another crucial discovery while examining Thomas's personal computer, which had been found in his private safe. His files contained photographs of dozens of additional artifacts, many of which were not found in the hidden room. These images appeared to be catalogs for potential buyers, with detailed descriptions and asking prices in various currencies. He was running a full-scale operation, Chen explained to the investigation team. These photos show artifacts from American museums, Asian collections, even pieces from private royal families. The hidden room was just his personal storage. He was shipping most stolen items to buyers immediately after theft. The computer files also revealed coded communications with contacts in Switzerland, Monaco, and the Cayman Islands, all locations known for their banking secrecy laws. Thomas had been depositing payments in multiple offshore accounts, making it nearly impossible to trace the full extent of his profits. As the investigation expanded, Interpol issued alerts to law enforcement agencies in 15 countries. The search for Thomas's accomplices and the remaining stolen artifacts became a top priority for international art crime units. Museums around the world began checking their collections against the catalog of items found in Thomas's computer files. Camilla, meanwhile, remained under informal surveillance at her sister's apartment. While investigators believed her claims of innocence, they needed to ensure she had no hidden knowledge about Thomas's criminal activities. The discovery of each new piece of evidence made it harder to believe that someone could live with Thomas for 30 years without noticing anything suspicious. The investigation was revealing that Thomas Harrison had been one of the most successful art thieves in modern history, operating an international criminal enterprise from the basement of his elegant London mansion, while his wife believed he was simply a successful businessman. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. Thomas's heart doctor, Dr. Margaret Stevens, contacted the police after seeing news reports about the treasure discovery. She had been treating Thomas for severe heart problems for 2 years and had become concerned about his increasingly erratic behavior during his final months. He was clearly under tremendous stress, Dr. Stevens told Inspector Walsh during their meeting at the hospital. During his last appointment just 3 weeks before he died, he kept talking about needing to clean house and tie up loose ends. I thought he was just worried about his business affairs, but now I wonder if he was planning something else. Dr. Stevens provided medical records showing that Thomas had been prescribed strong anxiety medications and had complained of constant nightmares. In his final weeks, he had asked multiple times about the symptoms of heart attacks and whether stress could trigger fatal episodes. The doctor now suspected that Thomas might have known his criminal empire was about to collapse. This medical information prompted Walsh to examine Thomas's final weeks more carefully. Bank records showed unusual activity during this period. He had made several large withdrawals from his offshore accounts and had contacted a lawyer about updating his will. Most significantly, he had purchased a safety deposit box at a private bank in Switzerland just 10 days before his death. The Swiss authorities agreed to cooperate with the investigation, and within a week, they had opened Thomas's safety deposit box under international law enforcement provisions. Inside, investigators found detailed records of every theft Thomas had committed over 20 years, including photographs, acquisition dates, and buyer information for hundreds of stolen artifacts. The records revealed that Thomas had been planning to retire from his criminal activities. He had been liquidating his network and preparing to disappear with Camilla to a country without extradition treaties. His sudden death had prevented this escape plan, leaving all the evidence intact for investigators to discover. Among the Swiss documents was a handwritten letter addressed to Camilla. In it, Thomas confessed everything and begged for her forgiveness. He explained that he had started stealing small items 30 years ago to pay off gambling debts, but the operation had grown beyond his control. Each successful theft had led to bigger opportunities and more dangerous criminal contacts. "My dearest Camilla," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then my heart has finally given out from the stress of living this double life. I never meant for things to go this far. What started as a desperate solution to my debts became an addiction, to the thrill of taking what others thought was impossible to steal." The letter continued with details about specific thefts and the locations of several additional hidden storage facilities in London and Paris. Thomas had rented these spaces under false names and had been gradually moving items there as he prepared for his planned retirement from crime. When Inspector Walsh read the letter to Camilla, the widow finally broke down completely. For weeks she had maintained her composure despite losing everything. But hearing Thomas's confession in his own words shattered her remaining strength. She sobbed as she realized that every moment of their marriage had been built on lies and stolen history. "He writes that he loved me too much to tell me the truth," Camilla said through her tears. "He says he was protecting me from becoming an accomplice. But how can I believe anything he says now? How can I mourn a man I never really knew?" The Swiss documents also contained insurance policies and offshore investment accounts worth over £50 million, all proceeds from Thomas's criminal activities. Under international law, these assets would be seized and used to compensate the museums and institutions that had lost artifacts to Thomas's thefts. Dr. Chen traveled to Paris and London to examine the additional storage facilities mentioned in Thomas's letter. Each location contained dozens more stolen items, bringing the total recovery to over 300 artifacts worth an estimated £200 million. The scope of Thomas's criminal enterprise far exceeded anything investigators had initially imagined. The investigation revealed that Thomas had developed relationships with corrupt security guards, dishonest museum staff, and criminal dealers across Europe. His network had included people working inside some of the world's most prestigious cultural institutions. Several arrests were made based on information found in his detailed records. As the full extent of Thomas's crimes became public, Camilla found herself at the center of a media storm. Reporters constantly approached her, wanting to know how she could have lived with such a master criminal without suspecting anything. The public was divided between those who believed her innocence and others who thought she must have been involved. Somehow, the stress of the investigation and media attention began affecting Camilla's health. She lost weight rapidly and developed severe insomnia. Her sister worried that the shock might be too much for her to handle, especially as new revelations about Thomas's crimes emerged almost daily from the ongoing international investigation. 6 months after the discovery, museums around the world began receiving their stolen treasures back. The process was emotionally overwhelming for curators who had given up hope of ever seeing these artifacts again. The Louvre held a special ceremony to welcome back the medieval manuscripts, while the Vatican publicly thanked the British investigators for recovering their ancient Roman coins. Camilla watched these ceremonies on television from her sister's apartment, feeling a complex mixture of relief and shame. While she was glad the stolen items were returning home, she could not escape the fact that her comfortable life had been funded by these thefts. Every piece of jewelry she had worn, every vacation she had enjoyed, every comfortable evening in her mansion had been paid for with money stolen from the world's cultural heritage. Detective Inspector Walsh made a final visit to interview Camilla before closing the case. The investigation had confirmed Camilla's innocence beyond any doubt, but Walsh wanted to help her understand the psychological manipulation she had endured during her marriage to Thomas. "Mrs. Harrison, you need to understand that your husband was a master manipulator," Walsh explained gently. "He didn't just steal artifacts, he stole 30 years of your life by keeping you trapped in an illusion. That makes you a victim too, not an accomplice." Walsh showed Camilla evidence of how carefully Thomas had constructed his false identity. He had created fake business documents, hired actors to pretend to be clients during phone calls Camilla might overhear, and even arranged for legitimate antique dealers to visit their home occasionally to maintain his cover story. The deception had been so thorough that even professional investigators might have been fooled. "He loved you enough to protect you from his crimes, but not enough to stop committing them," Walsh observed. "That's not real love, Mrs. Harrison. Real love doesn't involve living alive for 30 years. The conversation helped Camilla begin to separate her grief for the man she thought she knew from her anger at the criminal he actually was. She started attending counseling sessions to process the trauma of discovering that her entire adult life had been based on deception. Meanwhile, the international investigation was winding down. Thomas's criminal network had been dismantled, with arrests made in 7 countries. Several corrupt museum employees were facing charges, and private collectors who had knowingly purchased stolen artifacts were being prosecuted. The art world was implementing new security measures to prevent similar thefts in the future. Dr. Chen published a detailed academic paper about the case, describing it as one of the most sophisticated art theft operations ever discovered. Her research helped other investigators understand the methods used by high-level cultural criminals and provided insights for protecting museums and private collections. Commander Morrison received a commendation for his role in the investigation. The discovery of the hidden room had been the breakthrough that exposed the entire criminal network. Museums across Europe sent letters of gratitude to his unit, praising their careful handling of the recovered artifacts. As the media attention gradually faded, Camilla began thinking about her future. At 63 years old, she needed to build a new life from nothing. The government had allowed her to keep a small amount of money from accounts that predated Thomas's criminal activities, enough to rent a modest apartment and live simply. For a few years, she decided to volunteer at a local museum, helping with educational programs for children. Working around legitimate historical artifacts felt like a way to atone for unknowingly benefiting from their theft. The museum director, who knew her story, welcomed her contribution and praised her dedication to preserving cultural heritage. Camilla also began writing a memoir about her experience, hoping that her story might help other people recognize the warning signs of deception in their relationships. She wanted to show how even intelligent, observant people could be manipulated by skilled criminals who used love as a weapon. The house where she had lived for 30 years was eventually sold at auction, with the proceeds going to compensate the institutions that had lost artifacts to Thomas's thefts. Camilla attended the auction, watching strangers bid on the building that had once been her sanctuary. She felt surprisingly peaceful as she watched it become someone else's home. The final chapter of the investigation closed when Swiss authorities completed the asset recovery process. Over £60 million in stolen money was distributed among the museums and institutions that had been victims of Thomas's crimes. The recovery was the largest in art crime history and set new precedents for international cooperation in cultural heritage cases. 2 years after Thomas's death, Camilla stood in the British Museum's new exhibition titled Recovered Treasures. The Harrison Collection Returns Home. The display featured 25 of the most significant artifacts recovered from her former mansion, each accompanied by a placard explaining its theft and recovery. Visitors moved quietly through the gallery, marveling at the ancient treasures that had nearly been lost forever. Camilla had been invited to attend the opening ceremony as an honored guest. Museum officials recognized that her cooperation with the investigation had been crucial to recovering these priceless pieces of human history. Without her detailed information about Thomas's habits and contacts, many artifacts might never have been found. Standing before the golden chalice that she had once unknowingly served wine from during dinner parties, Camilla felt a profound sense of closure. The cup now sat in a climate-controlled case where millions of people could see and appreciate its beauty. This was where it belonged, not hidden in someone's private dining room. Dr. Chen approached Camilla during the exhibition. The archaeologist had become somewhat of a celebrity in academic circles for her work on the case, but she always credited Camilla's honesty and cooperation as essential to the investigation's success. "Mrs. Harrison, I wanted you to know that your husband's detailed records have helped us solve 12 other major theft cases," Chen said warmly. "Museums in Germany, Spain, and Italy have recovered artifacts they lost decades ago because of information found in his files." Camilla smiled sadly. "I suppose that's something positive that came from all this tragedy. At least his obsessive record-keeping helped undo some of the damage he caused." The museum's director, Sir Robert Hamilton, made a speech praising the international cooperation that had made the recoveries possible. He specifically thanked Camilla for her courage in coming forward with information that must have been painful to provide. The audience applauded as Camilla stood to acknowledge their gratitude. After the ceremony, Camilla walked through London's streets, reflecting on how much her life had changed. She now lived in a small flat near the museum where she volunteered 3 days a week. Her simple lifestyle was a dramatic contrast to the luxury she had known, but she had found genuine peace in her new circumstances. Her memoir, titled Living with a Stranger, My 30 Years with a Master Thief, had been published 6 months earlier. The book became an international bestseller, with readers fascinated by her insider's perspective on one of history's most notorious art theft cases. The royalties from the book provided enough income for her to live independently while continuing her volunteer work. Camilla donated a portion of her book profits to establish a fund that helps museums improve their security systems. She also spoke at conferences about art theft prevention, sharing insights about how criminals like Thomas operated and the warning signs that people should watch for in their personal relationships. The apartment where she now lived was modest but comfortable. The walls were decorated with reproductions of famous paintings and photographs from her volunteer work at the museum. She had learned to appreciate art for its historical and cultural value, rather than as symbols of wealth and status. Her relationship with her sister had grown stronger through the ordeal. They spent time together regularly, and Camilla had developed close friendships with other museum volunteers. For the first time in years, her relationships were based on honesty and shared interests, rather than the elaborate deceptions that had dominated her marriage. Commander Morrison occasionally checked on Camilla's well-being. He had become protective of her during the investigation and respected how she had handled the devastating revelations about Thomas. On his visits, he updated her about ongoing efforts to locate additional stolen artifacts and prosecute the remaining members of Thomas's criminal network. The final resolution came when Swiss banks released the last of Thomas's hidden assets. The total recovery exceeded £80 million, making it the largest art theft restitution in history. Museums around the world benefited from the returned funds, using the money to enhance their security and acquire new pieces for their collections. As Camilla prepared to leave the exhibition that evening, she paused one final time before the display case containing the Roman bronze statue that had sat openly on Thomas's office shelf. The placard explained that this piece had been stolen from the British Museum itself over a decade earlier. The irony was not lost on her. Thomas had displayed a stolen artifact from the very institution that now honored her cooperation in recovering it. Walking home through the London evening, Camilla felt grateful for the unexpected turn her life had taken. While she had lost everything she thought was important, her home, her financial security, her faith in her marriage, she had gained something more valuable: the knowledge that she was living an honest life and contributing to something greater than herself. The treasures had found their way home, and so finally had she.